I'm probably less optimistic than Adam that some of those that opening up of the ubiquitous space is going to be feasible. Apart from anything else, you've got a collision of different property regimes. The internet is a relatively clean space. Urban space is not cleaned. It's owned. There's all these, different dynamics, issues of ownership. And, I recently was involved in a project we ended up pulling out of, which was all about looking at exactly those kind of technologies in an advertising context. Ubiquitous displays, monitoring people in front of them. Some of the projects I've done in an art context have been really critical about that. And these things are happening. They're out there. And so I'm probably less optimistic than you, but I think it's a really great thing to focus on. So, hello, everyone. What was that?
That's my powder.
Yeah. I'm just going to put my phone out because I can probably talk for days, and I'm going to keep it to 20 minutes. So a couple of points just before I get going. I also was told I didn't need to prepare a presentation, so and then I was kind of looking at the themes of the session, but then also the dynamics yesterday, and I just wanted to make an observation and then throw it out there and not come back to it, which is really unfair. But I actually think that I've got some issues, some problems with the way that this is framed, actually, because I actually, think that open innovation is not the same as open source. And I think there's a conflation of those. And I think open innovation means something very, very specific. And it's to do with the way that business engages in its supply chain. I mean, in a really reductive sense. But, it's got a very specific meaning. And I looked through the text and I looked at the readings and I didn't know the readings. So there's probably some really excellent work being done to kind of bridge those two spaces. And we saw some yesterday. But I think that, you can, for me anyway, I found that a little problematic because I'm very much immersed in open source culture. And a lot of the work I do kind of butts up against people working in open innovation. I do work in open innovation, and I see them as related but quite distinct areas. But the thing I'm just going to start my timer because otherwise I get 3 minutes, and that's not fair on the next person. Actually, the thing I wanted to talk about, I'm going to talk about stuff that I do, which is really narcissistic, but there you go, the kind of guy I am. But the themes I wanted to talk about that I'm interested in are about how we can draw on open source culture to do things differently, to do culture differently, to do cities differently, and to do research differently. And I'm going to throw a question out there which isn't actually related to what I'm talking about, but is actually related to the kind of the meta level, if you like, for those geeks in the room. So we had a kind of interesting discussion about a slight collision of disciplinary languages and stuff yesterday. And, I used to be a philosopher, and I used to spend all my time talking a really technical, obscure language that only 3 people could understand. And I got really fed up with that. I thought, I don't want to play with words anymore. I want to play with cities and stuff. So my question is, so basically, I'm going to talk about Future Everything, which is my project. I run an organisation called Future Everything. I'm also an academic, and I'm going to talk about how Future Everything has become my research vehicle, instrument for my academic work, which I don't think academics in Spain would be able to do. It's very more open in the UK. And my question for those geeks in the room is, where's the philosophy? So I started off as a philosopher. I used to write texts. I used to study things. Well, I mean, before that I was involved in music, but I spent much of my career as a philosopher. My formal training, my academic training is in philosophy. And I now don't work in that space. I've career hopped several times. And in a sense, Future Everything was first started during my PhD as a vehicle to do philosophy by other means, through arts practice, through interventions in the city, through activism, through wanting to shake things up and mess things up a little bit. So my question is, I don't have the answer. Where's the philosophy now? It's a question. Anyway, so I also, just before I kind of get into the content, I also thought I'd throw the last slide. When I normally give a presentation, I end on this slide. And I thought that was a good slide to start on this time. So it's Future Everything is a collaborative project. Come and join us. And the reason I wanted to put that up, and also this next one, which is an example of, because we talk about how we hack the city, and this is an example about how we were hacked. Someone came and hacked our festival, which was really nice. Kind of, getting your own medicine there. But a lot of the stuff we're focusing on right now is how this project, and I'm going to talk about what the project is and how it works as this kind of a vehicle for not only research, more city development, more technology prototyping, community engagement. It's kind of an interface or an intermediary between different players. But we're turning that into an open platform. And so there's a number of things we're doing, like turning it into a set of toolkits so other people can do it, which is very much this ethos, which has been there for years in my talks. It's a collaborative project, come and join us. And so I thought I'd put that first. So, so Future Everything is two things. It's an organisation that runs year-round digital innovation projects, and it's also a festival. It's a festival that's been going 15 years, so it's the UK's sort of longest-running sort of digital culture festival. We don't use digital or innovation in the title because it's a project that engages with its public realm stuff. 50,000 people. About 500 or 600 people go to all the conferences and stuff. About sort of 12,000 go to the ticketed events, and then it's about 50,000 if you take into account all the outdoor stuff. There's 40 venues, 300 artists, and it's a festival of art. The art has kind of come out of, we did a lot of early work around sort of mobile, locative media, ubiquitous computing. My own practice as an artist was also about sort of critical views on this, concerns around surveillance, and that's kind of grown into an engagement in the city. So there's a lot of digital practice out in urban spaces. Music, big music strand, ideas. There's a conference very much at the heart of it. It's kind of inspiration space. We bring people together, look at different ideas. It's a global event. We've launched, we've experimented with a new model, a new way of doing events. Adam might be in one of those pictures. He often pops up in some of our pictures. So last year we experimented with an event format I'll talk about later called GlowNet, where we used telepresence to link up different venues. It's all about group-to-group connectivity. If the internet's if the internet's many-to-many, this was group-to-group connectivity. So we had venues, physical venues, or audiences, participants in Sendai, Japan, Istanbul, Sao Paulo, Manchester, Vancouver. And we linked them in different ways. It's also got an award, which is it's a new award, but it's a kind of only sort of digital innovation award in the UK. The inaugural winner was a fantastic project called the iWriter, sort of a low-cost, open-source project that tracks eye movements and enables people with mobility impairment to draw. And the next stage is to create an interface, computer interface. I always say that the festival and the organisation is made up by its community. The community of people who come to the event, that is the project. They are the project. They own the project. That community of people, that global network who arrive in Manchester once a year and who participate year round is very much at the heart of it. And then out of this has come these innovation labs, these digital innovation labs. The ethos says bringing the future into the present. And these labs tend to last between 9 and 36 months, each looking at different themes. A list of themes we've done over the years is there. So current ones: new mobilities, open data cities, distant collaboration, city experiment, which is finished, environment 2.0, that's now got a different form as Green Eyes. And through this, one of the key sort of motives for this has been a relationship with a university, Lancaster University, and Future Everything has become part of the research environment at Lancaster University, and quite an interesting thing to understand this relationship, particularly for people outside the UK, where there's not much about the UK I'll defend, certainly not at the moment. However, if I go to Germany or to Spain and talk to colleagues and talk about the view, the limit, the much more constrained view about what counts as research. I feel very honoured and lucky. So to give you an example, in the UK, research is assessed by this thing called the Research Assessment Exercise. The next one's REF, Research Evaluation Framework. It happens every 5 years. It's a complete nightmare. You have to justify what you do, and you have to put forward your best research outputs. So Lancaster University, one of the research outputs that was put forward was Future Sonic, as its previous name. Not just the researchy bits, the things that look like research, but the entire festival, music gigs and all. And that helped Lancaster become assessed as within the top 4 of UK universities for research in art and design. So, I mean, I think that's very brave of the university, but it also illustrates a really nice relationship. And generally, that's one relationship. The kind of model is an evolving business model behind Future Everything, which is all about elegant partnerships. So where we've got a really deep relationship with the university, where we've got a similar relationship with the City of Manchester, and we're developing relationships with private sector partners as well. That's partly because we want more impact. You know, we want to go to the people who are developing stuff and to shape them at the point at which they're making the key decisions. It's also a practical response to there not being much funding around. We had to go everywhere. But as I say, it's about impact and being able to kind of address these questions with the people who are actually, you know, developing those technologies. So just to talk quickly about the method before I talk about some of the projects. Of the living, so basically the method behind the madness is it's a living lab method. So living labs have come out of kind of computer science, and the model with Future Everything is that the festival provides a living lab environment. So the festival creates a space where participants can experiment and play, transforming the city into a space of experimentation, making it come alive. Participatory art design interventions create possible futures and enable people to inhabit them experientially and experimentally, bringing the future into the present. So I'm not a great believer in futurologists. I think they should be lined up against a wall and shot. And our ethos is about bringing the future into the present. So it's about working with, and I'm happy to say I should be shot as well, but it's looking about, okay, with flat playing field here. It's about looking at, you know, possible futures that are emerging today, and working with designers and artists, forming interdisciplinary groups, drawing on different disciplines, to develop prototypes which enable people to experience an aspect of a possible future today. That's the kind of core methodology and ethos behind it. These test innovations in art, science and technology, collaboratively generate ideas and concepts. Artwork activity can include artwork, so it's a festival, so there are some artworks in it, but also technology prototypes, a lot of social innovations. We're really concerned with social change and design projects, and it's about co-creating networked urban futures. And it's a really nice vehicle because it kind of works as a research dynamic, but it's also a very nice way of engaging in a city. And it's also a very nice offer to put in front of artists and designers. So for the city, we provide this tool. We provide a community that can work with the city to address design challenges. That's a great resource for a city, and when I talk about open sourcing it and some of the current developments, such as the toolkits we're producing, I'll talk about that more. But for the artists, it's amazing. You know, not every artist wants to do this, but you know, some artists, we give them the key to the city. You know, they can go and play with the infrastructure of the city. And this is because a lot of festivals kind of just parachute in wherever the funding is. But Future Everything over 15 years has developed very, very strong links with the City of Manchester. And there's a lot of trust that's grown up at all levels, sort of policy levels, but also the people who are literally on a day-to-day basis putting in place the street furniture. You know, and Manchester's a great city. There's some people doing that work who are really into the idea of art interventions. It's fantastic. You know, I get there and found they've already done art projects. It's amazing. And another thing about Manchester is it's a good size. It's kind of big enough to kind of have, you know, real impact. You do a project there, it's kind of at a scale that's quite impactful. But it's also just about small enough to do coordinated work. Whereas London or New York are just too big. You can't do something city scale in London or New York. You can't do anything at city scale. Boris Johnson can do Boris bikes, right? You know, but that's his pet project. Anything else is really difficult. When I talk about like the Manchester data store versus the London data store, we've got loads of advantages because it's just that sort of scale. So to talk about some projects we're doing, and I kind of cut out all the sort of historical stuff just before walking over because I just thought I'm not going to get through it all. So one of the projects we're doing at the moment is called Green Eyes, and it's about social sensing. It's come out of another project that ran from 2006 to 2009 called Environment 2.0, and that set out with a very modest aim of creating a global observatory of 1 billion eyes. So how can we use the the located technologies, pervasive media, the power of the internet to kind of connect us, the latent computing potential we carry in our pockets, but also the kind of methodologies, participatory methodologies to to generate data in new ways, and also to change, fundamentally it's about sustainability, to change our relationship to the environment. And we created a number of projects and prototypes. Biotagging was one. Climate bubbles was quite a nice one. So with climate bubbles, very playful, performative project actually. The prototype versions of this didn't produce really great data sets, but it's an experiment in methodology. So this we set out to try and devise means of capturing data sets that the Met Office, so we work with the Met Office here, the Met Office, Meteorological Office in the UK, and the Hadley Centre, to devise means of gathering data sets that the Met Office couldn't capture in any other way. Yeah, so how can we use bottom-up, peer-to-peer, open source, playful, participatory, performative means of generating data sets that they couldn't generate in any other way? We came up with some bubble games, so games blowing bubbles. The bubble race, you had to blow bubbles and race bubbles and time them and upload that to get speed. And then the bubble chase, where you blow bubbles, chase after the bubble until it pops, crosses a boundary or lands, blow another bubble, repeat that 10 times, upload start and end point to get direction, wind flow. So you get speed and direction, along with some we were capturing subjective, more whimsical data, such as what people were wearing as more informal indicators of weather. And that data, you can capture thousands of readings of wind flow across the city. The Met Office has no other way of doing that, and that enables you or we wanted to see if that could enable the Met Office to model the urban heat island phenomenon. That's kind of evolved into a new project, and we find out in the next few days if we're going to get funded for this. It's quite exciting, and I've not got much time, so I need to speed up, called Green Eyes, and that's more kind of hard data. So we're basically giving out personal sensors, city scale again, so Manchester, Amsterdam and Rennes, and basically involving citizens in capturing data, making sense of that data, visualizing that data, but working all the way through to data services, working with local authorities to see if the local authorities can use that data to drive policy. It's about closing the loop between citizens and policymakers. We're looking at the issues around trust of that data, provenance of data, etc. Another project that Adam was involved in was called the City Experiment and the Serendipity City Challenge, which actually responded to some of Adam's hypotheses around the network city. Distant collaboration, this is looking at new ways to be globally connected, and that's what led to the GlowNet project. New mobilities is a current one, so we're looking at transport. The next festival will have a bunch of projects, some of them innovation projects, digital innovation projects. We're actually doing impact trials of social media transport systems, etc., alongside artworks, which just challenge people to think about mobility in different ways. Smarter cities, so this is kind of evolved out of all this work. So I was involved in some work with The Guardian, led to a bunch of texts and events with IBM looking at smarter cities. I was very much interested in the role of community in that. Community is king. The way to develop sustainability is through communities. And then a current big project we've got on is called Open Data Cities. And this is an example where if you look at the kind of the climate bubbles, sort of very playful prototypes, that and in other projects like it is where these methods have sort of evolved. But as these methods have evolved, they've kind of matured, and they've taken us kind of quite a long way from the performative art context. And Open Data Cities is a project that emerged out of conversations with Adam was involved, other people involved in the festival. It kind of feeds into the festival, but it's really evolved kind of a long way from the festival into a policy space, into technology development space. So basically, Future Everything has been charged to lead Greater Manchester's transition to an open data framework. In most cities, those kind of projects are led by the Mayor's Office, and in Manchester it's led by a little digital culture indie, and it is a little digital cultural indie. So we're working at three levels. We're working with the policymakers, we're working with the data managers, a list of managers, and we're working to build the market. So we're developing a community, so we've been growing this community called Open Data Manchester. and we've been basically freeing up data sets, and then some applications to come out of it. So Manchester got in the news because it was the first city through our project to release its bus timetables, and some kids built some apps on the back of it. So we've had some success, but the real challenge actually is maintaining, is building the momentum. We're currently at a stage where through this project, there's more authorities there's a disproportionate number of authorities in Greater Manchester opening up their data compared to the rest of the UK. We're now being teamed up with one of the because we don't have a democratic mandate, so we've been teamed up with Trafford Borough Council to create the Greater Manchester Data Store. So there's a kind of we're sort of getting past the tipping point, but the institutional resistances to this are huge and really interesting where they arise. It's not always where you'd expect. But the challenge now is to build that demand, to show the use cases, to have the successful creative apps on the back of it. The kind of arguments are on the one side around transparency and evidence-based policy. The other is about innovation. We kind of our hypothesis was bringing together open innovation and open data to create an open data innovation ecology. But actually it's really tough because the quality of much of the data we currently have isn't great, So we're looking to work with. So the research, the return on investment isn't great for a developer. So we're now looking to work with educational institutes to kind of bridge this gap, to develop the apps in the absent, while we're working on getting the good data out there. I'm pretty good on time because I've got how am I doing? A few minutes left. So I just want to talk about new developments. So one big area we're focusing on is mass participation and citizen-led innovation. So how we can harness online communities and local global intelligence to define problems and find solutions. So that's a big focus. We're working with a bunch of partners, BBC, a bunch of partners around that. There's a great project called Voice Your View at Lancaster University. In computing, we're working with. We're increasingly looking at routes to impact, how the work we can do can actually inform real city development. So one thing we've launched last year was something called the City Debate, which is a sort of high-level debate with all levels of the city, from the city leader to big companies to communities to the arts sector, all the main agencies involved, and had this great debate about the future of the city. And the next stages to that, we're linking it up to the people who are making the investments, so that this kind of space for discussion and prototyping can actually really inform that spend and that development. And then we're looking to open source the festival itself. So one side of that is a kind of post-GlowNet model. GlowNet model was quite it's quite hierarchical. It's quite limited. We networked 5 venues. You couldn't really extend that model beyond 5. It's quite resource heavy. So we're looking at how we can make it easier for people to stage future everything events. We're providing the tools, the set of tools, and it's simple. It's basically a series of fact sheets, of info sheets. That's what it essentially is. We will be developing the actual useful tools, but it's really about just making the methods kind of really simple and accessible. So, but the interesting things here in terms of this kind of gathering of different people, so is who we're talking to, who's the audience for these sets of tools, because there's a number of communities we're engaging with. If we want to make what we do easy, we're an intermediary, so we have to make it easy for people who don't have us, who don't have an intermediary. So we're talking to the city leaders. If they want to use a festival as a lab, how would they need to go about it? We're talking to the university labs. What are the foibles and challenges of working with a festival? How do you get inside a festival organiser's head, or an artist or designer's head? We're talking to the festival organisers and the artists. If you want to work with an academic lab, you need to understand how they operate. You need to understand that they need peer-reviewed journal papers at the end of it. You need to understand how funding works. So we're kind of making that transparent. We're also, in making this available, and this is kind of demand-led, because we're part of this EU festivals network, and we wrote the bid. So the theme in the first 18 months is Festival as Lab. And then on the back of that, loads of other festivals around the world say, that's great, we want to use your methods, it's brilliant. And rather than be proprietary and say, back off, that's our USP, we want to make it easier for them. But also, seriously, we want to ensure that it's done seriously. There's a real method here. It's not just a bunch of fucking words, excuse my French, bunch of words to put in front of funders to say, yeah, we're going to do all this stuff, give us some more money. There's a real method there. So we want people to have access to that method. But also, there's bits where we describe what a method is. We describe what rigor means. Yeah? There's a bit, it's in the section. Festivals like the Toolkit 5, Tools, Methods, Rigor. It describes, at the highest level, it describes why have a method? Why try and be rigorous? What if you don't have it? Well, you can start now, but do this. Where might you go to develop methods? Here's a list of methods, but, you probably know some stuff which is a more innovative method than people in university labs. Don't underestimate your own knowledge. So it's kind of making all that thing. And then community engagement, how to grow your community, how to create elegant partnerships. That's kind of one of the early ones. That's the first meaningful fact sheet, because I think that's really important. It's all about participatory, collaborative working. This has all come out of open source culture, so how you can grow your community. And then, put up some case studies. So this is Social Networking Unplugged, which was kind of one of the early ones, actually, for us, where this method evolved. And we basically wanted to understand social media better. This was in 2007, 2008. So we commissioned 30 artists to create offline spaces for social networking and social interaction. And then ethnographers looked at how people made those spaces their own, how people hacked them, how people used them, how people adopted them, how they worked, how they broke. And publish academic texts on that. So we had some that were kind of esoteric, some that directly reference online sites. So there's one by Plan B, MySpace, Your Space, Our Space, in a shop window, kind of based on MySpace. One by Aaron Barthold called Friends. And then we did all these visualizations of the kind of process involved in using these very sort of craft-based offline tools for social networking. So there you go. I think I'll finish there because my time's up. Thank you very much.